Maya Chen's fingers trembled as she made the final adjustments to her robotic assistant, her dark eyes reflecting the fluorescent lights of Roosevelt Middle School's gymnasium. At 12, she possessed an engineer's precision and an inventor's soul, qualities that often left her feeling isolated among her peers, but alive in moments like these. The regional science fair represented everything she dreamed of, a chance to show the world that her ideas mattered, that she mattered. Almost there, ARIA, she whispered to her creation using the acronym she'd coined. Assisted Robotics for Independent Aging. The sleek, white robot stood nearly 3 feet tall, its sensors gleaming like curious eyes. Maya had spent 8 months designing and building ARIA from salvaged electronics, birthday money, and parts her mother Sarah had helped her order online. The robot could retrieve dropped items, remind users to take medication, and even detect falls, innovations that could transform the lives of elderly people struggling with mobility. Sarah Chen watched her daughter from across the gymnasium, her heart swelling with pride and worry in equal measure. At 34, Sarah had learned to stretch every dollar across 2 part-time jobs, morning shifts at the hospital cafeteria, and evening hours at a local accounting firm. Maya's passion for robotics meant sacrificing Sarah's own comforts, but seeing her daughter's brilliance unfold made every missed meal and extra work hour worthwhile. She's going to do amazing, Sarah murmured to herself, clutching the thermos of coffee that would substitute for breakfast. She'd taken the morning off from work, a luxury she couldn't afford, but a sacrifice she couldn't avoid. The gymnasium buzzed with nervous energy as dozens of students prepared their displays. Near the center of the room, Brandon Wells commanded attention with his usual magnetic confidence. The mayor's son had inherited his father's political charm and his mother's striking looks, making him Roosevelt Middle School's unofficial royalty. His science fair project, a traditional volcano with dry ice effects, occupied prime real estate, surrounded by his loyal court of admirers. "Check it out," Brandon announced loudly, triggering his volcano's eruption to the delight of gathering classmates. "Dad says the judges love the classics. Simple, effective, crowd-pleasing." Maya glanced nervously toward the commotion, then back to Ari. Her robot represented months of research into servo motors, Arduino programming, and sensor integration. She'd studied elderly care facilities, interviewed nurses, and even tested prototypes with her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who lived alone after her husband's passing. Every component served a purpose. Every line of code addressed a real human need. "Hey, robot girl," Brandon's voice cut through the gymnasium's chatter. He sauntered over with his entourage, Jake Morrison, the basketball team center, and Chloe Armstrong, whose Instagram followers treated her like a celebrity. "What's that thing supposed to be?" Maya's cheeks flushed. "It's ARIA, she helps elderly people with daily tasks," and Jake laughed. "You named your weird robot?" Maya said, "It's not weird," Maya said quietly, her accent carrying the slight inflection her grandmother had passed down, a heritage that Brandon's group had mocked before. ARIA can detect falls, retrieve objects, and provide medication reminders. The elderly population faces significant challenges with blah blah blah. Chloe interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Do you always talk like a textbook?" Brandon stepped closer, his smile sharp with cruelty. "Must be a cultural thing, right? All that weird robot talk." He mimicked Maya's slight accent, drawing snickers from his friends. "Maybe stick to making calculators or whatever." Maya's hands clenched into fists. She'd heard variations of these comments throughout middle school, jokes about her heritage, her intelligence, her quiet nature. But this was her moment, her chance to prove that brilliance transcended social hierarchies. "ARIA could help your grandparents," she said, finding a spark of courage, "or anyone who needs assistance maintaining independence as they age." "My grandparents live in a mansion with staff," Brandon replied, dismissively. "They don't need some cheap robot built by..." He deliberately bumped into Maya's display table as he turned away, sending ARIA tumbling to the floor. The robot's delicate sensor array cracked against the concrete, and several connecting wires pulled loose from their housings. "Oops," Brandon said with theatrical innocence. "Guess it's not very durable." Maya dropped to her knees, frantically examining the damage. ARIA's main processing unit seemed intact, but the fall had disrupted critical connections. Tears blurred her vision as she attempted repairs with shaking hands. "Oh no, she's crying," Chloe whispered loudly. Maybe she should have built something that actually worked. The judges began their rounds just as Maya managed to restore partial functionality to ARIA. But the robot's movements were jerky and unpredictable, its sensors giving false reading. When Judge Martinez asked for a demonstration, ARIA malfunctioned spectacularly, attempting to retrieve an object that wasn't there and nearly toppling off the table. Interesting concept, Judge Martinez said kindly, but execution is crucial in engineering. Perhaps you can refine the stability issues for next year. Maya nodded wordlessly, watching as the judges moved to Brandon's volcano display. His presentation was polished and confident, complete with rehearsed jokes and dramatic timing. The dry ice eruption earned applause from gathered students and impressed nods from the judging panel. When the first round results were announced, Brandon's name echoed through the gymnasium's speakers. Maya's was not among the advancing participants. Sarah arrived just as Maya was packing ARIA's broken components into their carrying case. She'd rushed from work, still wearing her hospital cafeteria uniform, expecting to find her daughter glowing with pride. Instead, she discovered Maya hunched over her project, tears streaming down her cheeks while Brandon and his friends celebrated nearby. "Maya, honey, what happened?" Sarah knelt beside her daughter, her heart breaking at the sight of the damaged robot. "It doesn't matter," Maya whispered. "I'm not smart enough. I don't belong here." From across the gymnasium, Brandon's laughter rang out like a victory bell, each note a reminder that sometimes the world rewarded cruelty over creativity, privilege over perseverance. Sarah wrapped her arms around Maya, fury burning in her chest as she watched the mayor's son bask in undeserved glory. Neither mother nor daughter could have imagined that this moment of injustice would become the catalyst for a transformation that would change not just their lives, but their entire community's understanding of what it meant to stand up for what was right. The security footage was grainy, but the truth was crystal clear. Sarah's hands gripped the principal's desk as she watched Brandon Wells deliberately shoulder-check Maya's display table, sending ARIA crashing to the floor. The timestamp showed 8:47 a.m., 30 minutes before the judging began, when the gymnasium was nearly empty except for early arriving participants. "I need a copy of this recording," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rage coursing through her veins. Principal Henderson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mrs. Chen, I understand you're upset, but these things happen at competitive events. Sometimes equipment fails under pressure." "Equipment doesn't fail, it was sabotaged." Sarah's finger jabbed at the frozen screen. "That boy deliberately destroyed my daughter's project. Now let's not make accusations we can't prove. Brandon is a good student from a respected family." "Respected family?" Sarah's composure cracked. "Is that why you're protecting him? Because his father signs your budget approval." The principal's silence spoke volumes. Sarah realized with bitter clarity that this conversation would go nowhere. The system was designed to protect students like Brandon Wells, not brilliant outcasts like Maya. That evening, Maya sat at their small kitchen table, methodically disassembling ARIA's damaged components. Her movements were mechanical, devoid of the passion that usually animated her work. "I've been thinking about transferring to Lincoln Middle School," Maya said without looking up. "Maybe a fresh start would be better." Sarah set down her coffee mug, studying her daughter's defeated posture. "Is this the first time Brandon has bothered you?" Maya's hands stilled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, like a dam bursting, the words poured out. Months of subtle harassment. Jokes about her weird interests and her immigrant grandmother's accent. Projects mysteriously going missing before presentations. Social media comments that made her dread opening her phone. "He's never done anything this obvious before," Maya whispered, "but everyone just laughs when he makes fun of me. Even some teachers think it's harmless teasing." Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. She'd spent years teaching Maya to keep her head down, work hard, and prove herself through achievement. But quiet perseverance meant nothing when the system itself was rigged. "No more running," Sarah said firmly. "No more hiding." Over the next 3 days, Sarah transformed into a woman on a mission. She contacted the local newspaper's education reporter, providing the security footage and documenting the pattern of harassment Maya had endured. She reached out to Maya's 7th grade science teacher, Rodriguez, who had been advocating for Maya all year. "I've seen Maya's potential," Miss Rodriguez said during their phone call. "She's the most naturally gifted student I've taught in 15 years. but she's been withdrawing lately. And now I understand why. What can we do? Sarah asked. There's still the state science fair. Maya qualified through my recommendation based on her previous work. If she's willing to rebuild ARIA and try again. Sarah found Maya in the garage that night, surrounded by electronic components and programming manuals. Her daughter had been quietly working for hours improving ARIA's design with modifications she'd been considering for months. I thought you were giving up, Sarah said gently. I was, but then I remembered why I built her in the first place. Maya held up a small sensor component. Miss Patterson called today. She fell in her kitchen yesterday and couldn't reach her medication. She was on the floor for 2 hours before her neighbor found her. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, seeing not a defeated child but a young inventor with fire returning to her eyes. ARIA could have helped her, Maya continued. And there are thousands of people like Mrs. Patterson who need what I've created. I can't let Brandon Wells steal that from them. Then we fight back, Sarah said. Not with cruelty or revenge, but with truth. We show the world who you really are and what you can accomplish. Maya looked up at her mother, a spark of determination replacing the despair that had clouded her features since the science fair disaster. Mom, next time I won't be quiet when they try to tear me down. Sarah smiled, recognizing her own stubborn resilience, reflected in her daughter's face. Next time you won't have to face them alone. The state science fair at the convention center was a different universe from Roosevelt Middle School's modest gymnasium. Hundreds of displays filled the vast hall representing the best young minds from across the region. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she positioned ARIA to her assigned table, the robot's upgraded sensors gleaming under the professional lighting. 3 weeks of relentless work had transformed her original design. The new fall detection algorithm was more sophisticated. The medication reminder system included voice recognition, and most importantly, the structural integrity could withstand deliberate sabotage. Maya had stress-tested every component, imagining Brandon's cruel hands trying to destroy her work again. Remember, sweetheart, Sarah whispered, adjusting Maya's name tag. You belong here. Your ideas matter. But Maya's confidence wavered when familiar laughter echoed across the convention floor. Brandon Wells had qualified for state with his volcano project, flanked by the same group of enablers who had witnessed ARIA's destruction. He moved through the crowd with practiced charm, shaking hands with judges, and posing for photos his mother snapped enthusiastically. Well, Brandon's voice carried over the ambient noise as he approached Maya's station. Look who decided to show up again, still playing with broken toys. Jake and Chloe flanked him, their expressions mixing boredom with anticipated entertainment. Maya's stomach clenched, but she forced herself to stand straighter. ARIA isn't broken, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She's sure she is. Brandon reached toward the robot, his intention clear. Don't. Maya stepped protectively in front of her display. Don't touch her. Brandon's eyes narrowed at the unexpected resistance. What are you going to do about it, robot girl? Before Maya could respond, a clear voice cut through the tension. Excuse me, but I'm fascinated by your robotic design. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 40s approaching, her professional demeanor commanding immediate attention. She wore a crisp navy blazer with a subtle pin that read Tech Forward Industries, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. Something about her presence shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Tech Forward Industries, she continued, extending her hand to Maya. I've been observing your project from across the hall, and I'm quite impressed by the sophistication of your sensor integration. Tech Forward Industries was one of the leading robotics companies in the country. Their autonomous systems used in hospitals and research facilities worldwide. Dr. Rodriguez wasn't just any stranger, she was a legend in the field. Maya dreamed of entering. Thank you, Maya managed, shaking the offered hand. I'm Maya Chen. This is ARIA Assisted Robotics for Independent Aging. Dr. Rodriguez crouched to examine the robot more closely, her questions revealing deep technical knowledge. The fall detection algorithm, are you using accelerometer data combined with machine learning pattern recognition? Yes, but I've also integrated proximity sensors to distinguish between intentional sitting and accidental falls. Maya explained, her nervousness evaporating as she discussed her passion. Traditional systems have too many false positives, and the medication management system. Brandon and his friends stood awkwardly nearby, clearly out of their depth as Maya and Dr. Rodriguez delved into technical discussions about servo motor efficiency and voice recognition protocol. The conversation drew other observers, fellow students, parents, and even some judges who had been circulating through the hall. The elderly population faces unique challenges with technology adoption, Maya continued, gaining confidence as she explained. ARIA's user-friendly interface. So I designed the interaction to be as natural as possible, using voice commands that feel like conversation rather than computer programming. Dr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. At Tech Forward, we've been working on similar challenges for institutional care facilities. Your approach to individual home care is innovative and practical. It's just a stupid school project, Brandon interjected, his voice betraying frustration at being sidelined. It's not like it's real technology or anything. Dr. Rodriguez straightened slowly, her gaze shifting to Brandon with cool assessment. I've spent 25 years in robotics development, young man. This school project demonstrates more sophisticated engineering than many graduate-level designs I've reviewed. The gathering crowd murmured with interest, several people taking photos of ARIA while Maya answered questions about her development process. Brandon's confident facade began to crack as he realized he'd lost control of the situation. Rodriguez said, raising her voice slightly to address the growing audience, "Would you be interested in a summer internship with Tech Forward Industries? We have a program for exceptional young innovators, and your work here suggests you'd be a perfect candidate." The convention hall seemed to fall silent around Maya. The summer internship with Tech Forward was beyond her wildest dreams, an opportunity that could change the trajectory of her entire future. Rodriguez smiled warmly. Excellent. I'll also be announcing today that Tech Forward is launching a new scholarship program for students pursuing robotics and engineering. Maya, you'll be our first recipient. Full tuition support for your continued education, plus mentorship opportunities with our development team. The crowd burst into spontaneous applause. Maya felt tears of joy replacing the tears of humiliation she'd shed 3 weeks earlier. In the distance, she spotted her mother pushing through the crowd, Sarah's face glowing with pride and amazement. Brandon stood frozen, his usual confidence completely shattered. The stranger who had walked into their confrontation hadn't just changed Maya's day, she had transformed Maya's entire future, in front of witnesses who would carry the story far beyond the convention center walls. Never let anyone convince you that your dreams are too big or your ideas don't matter. The world needs more innovators like you. By Monday morning, Maya's story had exploded across social media. Someone had recorded Dr. Rodriguez's scholarship announcement on their phone, and the video went viral with hashtags like bullying backfires and STEM heroes. The local news station picked up the story, framing it as an inspiring tale of perseverance triumphing over adversity. But the real earthquake began when Maya's science teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, connected the dots between the viral video and the security footage Sarah had provided weeks earlier. The story of deliberate sabotage at the regional science fair emerged, painting a stark picture of systemic bullying that had been overlooked by school administration. "Young Innovator Overcomes Bullying to Win Major Scholarship," read the headline in the Tribune's education section. The article didn't name Brandon directly, but Roosevelt Middle School students filled in the blanks quickly. Screenshots of old social media posts began circulating, cruel comments Brandon had made about Maya's projects, mocking memes about her accent, and photos of him posing smugly with his volcano display while Maya packed up her broken robot in the background. Sarah watched the developments from her hospital cafeteria workstation, fielding calls from reporters and trying to process how quickly their private struggle had become public. The attention was overwhelming, but she felt a fierce satisfaction seeing her daughter's brilliance finally recognized. At Roosevelt Middle School, the hallways buzzed with whispered conversation. Students who had witnessed Brandon's cruelty for years began speaking up, sharing their own stories of his behavior. Emma Martinez revealed how Brandon had accidentally spilled chocolate milk on her presentation poster last year. David Kim described months of jokes about his family's Korean restaurant that had made him dread lunch periods. "It's like everyone suddenly found their voices," Ms. Rodriguez told Sarah during a phone call. Maya's courage to rebuild and try again has inspired other students to speak up about their experiences. Mayor Richard Wells called an emergency meeting with Principal Henderson, demanding to know how his son's name had become associated with baseless accusations. By Tuesday afternoon, a counter-campaign emerged on social media, with accounts claiming Maya had fabricated the whole story for attention. "Brandon Wells is a victim of jealousy and false accusations," read a post from a newly created account called Truth About Roosevelt. Some people will do anything for fame, even destroy a good kid's reputation. The backlash hit Maya harder than she'd expected. Walking through school became a gauntlet of stares and whispered comments from both supporters and detractors. Some students treated her like a celebrity, asking for selfies and wanting to hear about her internship. Others, particularly those loyal to Brandon's social circle, made snide remarks about playing the victim and making everything about race. Sarah faced her own consequences when her supervisor at the accounting firm mentioned that some clients were concerned about the negative publicity surrounding their employee. The implication was clear: her job could be at risk if the controversy continued. Maybe we should just let this die down, Sarah told Maya one evening as they sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by interview requests and social media notifications. You got your scholarship. That's what matters. Maya looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reading comments on the viral video. For every supportive message, there seemed to be two questioning her motives or defending Brandon's character. Mom, look at this, Maya said, showing Sarah a private message on her school email. It's from a 6th grader named Amy. She says Brandon has been bullying her since September, but she was too scared to tell anyone. Now she wants to know if she should speak up too. Sarah read the message, her heart breaking for another child, trapped in Brandon's pattern of cruelty. There are 12 more messages like this, Maya continued. Kids who saw what happened to me and realized they don't have to suffer alone. The phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Dr. Rodriguez's warm voice filled the kitchen through the speaker. Maya, I wanted to check how you're handling all the attention. This level of publicity can be overwhelming, especially for someone your age. It's scary, Maya admitted, but I keep thinking about all the people who reached out to share their stories. If speaking up helps even one person, isn't it worth it? Dr. Rodriguez's approval carried through the phone line. That's exactly the kind of thinking that will make you an exceptional engineer and leader. But remember, you don't have to carry this burden alone. Tech Forward has resources to help you navigate this situation. This wasn't just about her anymore. It had become about every student who had ever been made to feel small by someone with more power and privilege. The Roosevelt Middle School auditorium had never hosted an event quite like this. What began as a routine school board meeting had transformed into a community reckoning, with every seat filled and overflow crowds standing along the walls. Local news cameras lined the back of the room, their red recording lights casting an ominous glow over the proceeding. Maya sat in the front row between her mother and Dr. Rodriguez, who had flown in specifically for this meeting. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her prepared statement, knowing that in 20 minutes she would address the packed auditorium about her experiences with bullying at Roosevelt Middle School. 3 rows behind them, Brandon Wells slumped between his parents, his usual confidence completely absent. The past 2 weeks had been brutal for the Wells family. The security footage from the science fair had finally been released publicly, showing Brandon's deliberate sabotage of Maya's project in undeniable clarity. More damaging still, the investigation had uncovered a pattern of incidents spanning 3 years: destroyed projects, cruel social media posts, and coordinated harassment campaigns that school administrators had consistently dismissed as boys being boys. The board recognizes Maya Chen, announced board president Linda Foster, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Maya walked to the podium on unsteady legs, adjusting the microphone with shaking fingers. The sea of faces before her included classmates, teachers, parents, and reporters, all waiting to hear her story. She found her mother's encouraging smile in the crowd and began to speak. My name is Maya Chen, and I'm 12 years old. 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was building a robot that could help elderly people live independently. I thought if I worked hard enough, studied long enough, and stayed quiet enough, my achievements would speak for themselves. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I was wrong. Staying quiet didn't protect me from harassment. Working hard didn't stop someone from destroying my project. Being brilliant didn't matter when the system was designed to protect my bully instead of me. Maya described the months of subtle cruelty, the destroyed projects, the mockery of her heritage, and finally, the deliberate sabotage that had devastated her dreams. But she also spoke about resilience, about rebuilding ARIA not just as a robot, but as a symbol of refusing to be silent. Brandon Wells didn't just try to break my robot that day, he tried to break my spirit, my confidence, and my future. But he failed. because Dr. Rodriguez saw my potential and believed in my dreams when the adults who were supposed to protect me looked the other way. The auditorium was completely silent except for the occasional sob from the audience. Maya's words carried the weight of every student who had ever felt powerless against institutional indifference. I'm not standing here for revenge, Maya continued, her voice clear and strong. I'm here because 12 other students have contacted me with their own stories of harassment that was ignored. I'm here because staying silent means the next brilliant kid might give up before they get their chance to change the world. As Maya returned to her seat, the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Dr. Rodriguez squeezed her hand, whispering, "That was extraordinary." The board called Brandon Wells to speak next. He approached the podium, looking smaller than Maya had ever seen him, his usual swagger replaced by genuine fear. His prepared statement was a stilted apology crafted by lawyers, but halfway through, his composure cracked. "I'm sorry," he said, abandoning his script. "I was jealous of how smart Maya is, and I thought if I made her feel bad about herself, it would make me feel better about being ordinary." Tears streamed down his face as he continued. "But it didn't make me feel better, it made me into someone I." Mayor Wells stood abruptly, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "This is enough. My son is being crucified for typical teenage behavior." "Sit down, Richard," Board President Foster said firmly. "Your son isn't finished." Brandon looked at his father, then back at the crowd. "Dad, please, let me finish." The mayor sat reluctantly as Brandon continued his apology, acknowledging the specific harm he'd caused to Maya and other students. His words were halting and imperfect, but they carried the weight of genuine remorse. Dr. Rodriguez then took the podium, announcing an expanded anti-bullying initiative funded by Tech Forward Industry. The program would provide resources for students, training for teachers, and most importantly, real consequences for harassment that had previously been overlooked. Maya Chen represents the future of innovation and leadership, Dr. Rodriguez declared, but her talent almost never saw the light of day because adults failed to protect her from systematic harassment. "We cannot allow that to happen to another child." The board voted unanimously to implement new anti-bullying policies, including mandatory reporting procedures and regular climate surveys. Principal Henderson, who had initially dismissed Maya's concerns, announced his resignation effective at the end of the school year. As the meeting concluded, Maya found herself surrounded by supporters, reporters, and other students who wanted to share their own story. The scared, isolated girl who had packed up her broken robot 3 weeks earlier had been transformed into a voice for change, a symbol of resilience, and an inspiration to every kid who had ever been told their dreams didn't matter. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty isn't revenge, it's refusing to let that cruelty define your future. 1 year later, Maya stood before a new audience at the National Science Fair, but this time, her hands were steady and her voice was strong. ARIA 3.0 had evolved far beyond her original design, incorporating feedback from elderly care facilities and featuring improvements suggested by her Tech Forward Industries mentorship team. The robot now included emergency response capabilities, biometric monitoring, and even companionship features that helped combat social isolation among elderly users. Rodriguez announced during the closing ceremony, her pride evident as she addressed the crowd of young innovators. Maya Chen, at 13 years old, is now the youngest patent holder in Tech Forward Industries history. The thunderous applause that followed felt different from the sympathy and outrage that had surrounded Maya a year earlier. This was recognition earned through merit, innovation, and perseverance, the kind of success that no one could diminish or destroy. Sarah watched from the audience, tears of joy streaming down her face. The scholarship program had not only secured Maya's educational future, but had also led to new opportunities for Sarah herself. Tech Forward had offered her a position in their community outreach division, allowing her to leave behind the exhausting juggle of multiple part-time jobs. In the crowd, Maya spotted a familiar face, Brandon Wells, who had asked permission to attend the fair. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could have predicted. After completing a year of community service and counseling, Brandon had approached Maya with a genuine desire to make amends. He now volunteered with the anti-bullying program Dr. Rodriguez had established, sharing his story with younger students about the destructive nature of cruelty and privilege. "I wanted to see you succeed," Brandon said when he approached Maya after the ceremony. "I know I can never undo what I did, but watching you thrive, it helps me believe that people can really change." Maya studied his face, seeing none of the arrogance that had once made him her tormentor. "People can change," she agreed, but it takes courage to face what you've done and work to be better. The anti-bullying program at Roosevelt Middle School had become a model for other districts, with regular workshops, peer mediation training, and most importantly, a culture where speaking up was encouraged rather than discouraged. Amy, the sixth grader who had first reached out to Maya, now served as a student ambassador for the program, helping other victims find their voices. Ms. Rodriguez, who had been promoted to head the district's STEM initiatives, often used Maya's story in her presentations to other educators. Talent can emerge from anywhere, she would tell her audiences, but it takes a community commitment to nurture and protect that talent, especially when it comes from students who don't fit traditional molds. Rodriguez had become more than a mentor to Maya, she was family now, joining the Chens for holidays and celebrating every milestone in Maya's journey. The scholarship program she had established in Maya's honor now supported 25 students across the country, each pursuing their dreams in science and technology with the backing they needed to succeed. As Maya packed up ARIA 3.0 for the journey home, she reflected on the unexpected path that had brought her to this moment. The broken robot on the gymnasium floor had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of a transformation that reached far beyond her own life. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Patterson, now 92 and living independently with the help of an early ARIA prototype. "Saw you on the news, dear. So proud of our brilliant engineer. ARIA reminded me to take my medication and told me a joke today. You're changing the world, one robot at a time." Maya smiled, understanding finally that the stranger who had walked into her life at the state science fair hadn't just changed her trajectory. She had helped Maya discover that her greatest power wasn't in her invention, but in her ability to inspire others to believe that brilliance, kindness, and courage could overcome any obstacle. The scared 12-year-old who had once packed up her broken dreams had become a patent-holding innovator, anti-bullying advocate, and proof that sometimes the most profound victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from transforming the world around us into a place where the next brilliant kid doesn't have to fight so hard to be heard.